you something of what it means to be involved in these strange times and to discover something of God in these strange times. COVID-19, it will always be remembered, 2020, as the year of COVID-19. And as we meet together today, some of you are gathered from all over the UK and perhaps from all over the world. You will meet 5 panellists. They've come as members of the Strathclyde Methodist Circuit. They all belong to Strathclyde, and they will be bringing their particular slant on COVID-19, especially in regard to their work situation. All of them come from 5 different areas of work, and we invite you to share with us. Send in your questions in the Q&A, and we'll come back to you later in the webinar and try and answer some of those questions in as best way we can. I'm going to invite the panelists to introduce themselves and to answer one very simple starter question. When I call your name, panelists, I'd like you to just say a little about yourself and then answer the question, how has COVID-19 affected you and your work environment? Just give me 2 minutes each. How has COVID-19 affected you and your work environment here in 2020? And we'll start with Jen. Could you introduce yourself, Jen, and then try and answer a little of the question?
So I'm Jen. My background is in science and physics. I'm currently working as a software developer. So for our work environment, the biggest change has been working from home. Because all of our work was done on a computer, we've pretty much just picked up the computers and moved to our home desks. So that's had a difference in communication. We now have a lot of video meetings, and we have to use the text chat facilities a lot more, when previously we might have stopped by each other's desks to talk about stuff. But fundamentally, we've still been able to do the same work, just in a different way.
How has it affected you personally? I mean, have you found a rhythm to living with this in these strange times?
I've settled into a slightly different rhythm than when I was commuting over to the office. Fundamentally, it is quite similar. You get up, you do your work, you do the things you need to do in the evening, and rinse and repeat for 5 days of the week. But then obviously the social life and... Sorry, Andrew.
Have you kept well yourself? Have you kept well?
Pretty much. I live on my own, so it has been challenging at times, but there are lots of good people around.
Really good to have you as part of the panel tonight. Thanks, Jen. Let's go then to Sarah.
I'm Sarah. I work as an NHS consultant in paediatrics. I think the challenges within the health service have been fairly well publicised on the news, and I'm not sure that you need me to reiterate all of that. What I would say was that in paediatrics we have not seen vast numbers of COVID patients, but it has still affected the way we work quite significantly. We have had some colleagues redeployed into adult services. We have had colleagues redeployed off rotas onto different rotas. We have had to reorganise rotas so that vulnerable colleagues are not exposed to any patient care at all. We have seemed to spend the last 10 weeks constantly reorganising. We've reorganised, and then we've reorganised the reorganisation, and then we've reorganised the reorganisation of the reorganisation all over again. Rotas have been difficult. We have had people off isolating. We've had to cover for people at the last minute. So it has made life difficult. I think the major change for most of us is actually not seeing patients as much as before. We have moved on to seeing our outpatients by telephone or video consultation, which is quite different. And I actually got unreasonably excited last week when I saw a proper real patient in a proper outpatient clinic. so it has affected us. We have also discovered the wonders of Zoom and Microsoft Teams for meetings. We are doing endless meetings online and trying to stay socially distanced in our offices when we go to work. And I have to say that I felt quite lucky that I have been able to keep going to work, because that has given me human contact and perhaps a little bit more of a sense of normality than other people were achieving.
Sarah, thank you. That's really, really helpful to hear something of your background. I should have added at the beginning that of our 5 panelists, they all work for particular companies or trusts, and what they say is their own opinion. They're not speaking on behalf of anybody else. So just blame the messenger. Good to have you here, Sarah. Thank you for joining the panel tonight. I'm going to go to Laurent next. Laurent's quite a talker, so I'm going to, I'll wave when you've talked for long enough, okay?
That's not going to make any difference, don't worry, Andrew. I'm Laurent, and I'm a minister in the circuit, Strathclyde circuit. And the way COVID-19 have changed our life as leader of the church, I've been very much, because our church tend to be very much community orientated. And of course, the fact we don't meet, we had to reinvent ourselves. And it's kind of old adage, try to change to remain the same. And I think that has been very much the case in the first instance. One big thing that have changed is for us to help the older generation to embrace the technology, for them to be able to join on Zoom, on telephone, on all the different IT platforms existing. And when you try to teach someone who is in his or her 80s or 90s, sometimes even lower than that, the beauty of computers, it can be a little bit challenging, especially when they never open a computer beforehand. And to do all that over the phone can be really great fun. It's maybe one of the reasons I lost a lot of my hair. Try to be, well, as now, one thing a little bit sad is on the first week of the lockdown, we lost one of the members of the congregation, but through COVID-19. So straight at the beginning, COVID-19 was something very, very present in the community around us, and very conscious that it was not just a figure on the TV or on the radio, but it was something that touched really people. So that is the way COVID-19 influenced our work and our life.
Laurent, thank you. Laurent is my colleague in Strathclyde. He's an inspiration and has become a good friend over these last 2 years. Thanks for joining the panel this evening, Laurent. We go now to Fiona. Fiona is also a bit of a talker, so I may have to butt in on her too. But Fiona, would you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about COVID-19 and you and your work?
Hi there, I'm Fiona. I'm from East Kilbride and I'm a local authority councillor. So for me, it's been an entirely different way of working. I'm working from home, and there've actually been a lot of improvements to my outreach because I'm now using social media a lot more to reach a much higher number of people. I'm helping keep people informed and fact-checked relevant information. But there are deteriorations with regards to the lack of community activities, lack of services, people affected because they're not geared up for digital use of libraries, etc. And there are now the same needs in the community, but perhaps they're hidden from view. And also there are other needs now due to loss of jobs, lack of childcare, lack of schools, mental health issues. The council's had to prioritise services, and they've been amazing in delivering food parcels, making phone calls to those that are shielding delivering hot meals at lunchtime. And they've had to work in partnership with community groups, and I think this has been amazing. It's long overdue, and I think they've realised that this must continue. There are major issues in South Lanarkshire with elected members not being able to access committees, and officers are making decisions without scrutiny. So it's probably opened up a whole new way of working that perhaps some were just not ready for.
Fiona, thank you. You've opened a bit of a can of worms there, and we perhaps better just close it for now, but we might reopen it a bit later. But thank you that you've brought a little bit of a positive slant as to what might come out of this as well, which is quite helpful. And now to our final panelist, and I leave Isaac to introduce himself. Isaac, are you there?
Hi, can you hear me now?
Yes, we're hearing you.
Right, I'm Isaac. I work in financial services, to be specific, stocks and shares. Most of what I do is digital, so I don't need to go to the office to do my work, even though I did before COVID. So now that we are in this period, the office is shut, I'm essentially working from home, doing a lot of video conferencing with colleagues, training, meetings, still managing to meet all the strict deadlines and being aware of all the risk that comes with my job. Unfortunately, because I'm a parent, also I have to I've got children that I have to cater for and do homeschooling. But I've got that flexibility of starting early, finishing early, taking 2 or 3 hours break, and then making that up later in the day. So I've got a lot of flexibility, and working from home is something that I was used to before COVID. So the transition has not been, a difficult one. The good thing that comes out of it is maybe I don't have to travel to work, so I can just jump to my desk in my jammies. So I'm not on the bus, but I'm missing my colleagues. We work to strict deadlines, but we have a laugh, we joke, but we miss all that. But like you say, technology is helping us that we can even, as colleagues, we can come and have a Zoom quiz Friday after work and have a bit of fun, just to bring us together because we miss each other. But in all that, I'm managing my work very well.
Isaac, that sounds really, really positive as well. I know there are challenges, but it's really great to have you here with us on the panel. I'm going to go and ask each of you a different question now, and I hope you'll rise to the challenge. I do remind folks that you can use the Q&A facility to ask your own questions at this time. This COVID-19 has caused so much suffering. There are a number of us who know those who have died, those who have struggled with sickness. Many of us know about the difficulties that there are with the economy and with businesses, and the loss of jobs, the loss of meaning and hope, the sense of challenges with mental health. All these things have been serious losses, and people have lost very much during this time. And yet we say we believe in an almighty God. So are we now in a position then to blame this God for COVID-19? That's underlying some of the questions that I'll be asking you in a moment. Isaac, you might just be able to help us in a very practical way. All of us depend on finance. And I wondered if you could tell us how the COVID-19 pandemic has affected the global stock market and how this might affect us.
Thank you, Andrew. I'm sure you've probably heard on the news that the economy is not doing very well. What they say is true. COVID-19 has affected every economy in the world. Last week, World Bank predicted that the global economy is going to shrink by approximately 2.5% this year. Now, if this goes as planned, that would mark the deepest recession since World War II. So we hope things get better. But then you're looking at the stock market, how it affects it. And I just want to look at the key indices in the world, then you're looking at the FTSE for UK, the Dow Jones for America, the DAX for Germany. All the indices are downward. They're all going down, telling us that you're not doing well. On the contrary, trading volumes have gone up in record numbers. And if you are looking at figures on the London Stock Exchange, the UK order book, you can see it from December. Sorry if you don't like figures, I'm going to come in here with a bit of figures. I won't be too long on that. In December, when Cobvid started, trading volumes went down by 19%, comparing 2019 to 2020. Then if you look at January, it went down to 14%. February, trading volumes went up to 24%. And in March, unprecedented, went up by 144%. Lots of people trading, and it's gone up and up. But then what I see here is that people react based on market confidence. So what investors are doing is they're taking advantage of the low prices in the hope that when these prices rise in future, they can make huge gains. So if you're looking at like a long-term investor, someone looking for returns within the next 5 to 7 years, then most of these people are taking advantage. And that explains why, in spite of the fact that the indices are going down, trading volumes are going up. On the other side, if you're looking at somebody who's got a portfolio prior to COVID, then they have lost a lot of money. The market value of their investments has just gone down. So as a case of human beings are motivated by their own interests, and people like to take advantage of the situation and make huge gains for themselves with the hope that things will get better. But no one can tell. China's gone to a second spell of COVID numbers are going up again. So it's possible that people who are predicting that things will get better, and I think that's what we all hope for. It may not be so, and they may also lose. But then it's a game of, it's an unknown world, and it's affecting everything in the world.
And thank you for that, Isaac. I mean, some of it you're talking over my head, but I guess that they're getting the idea that there are winners and losers.
Yeah.
Where's God in all this? God smiling?
If you are that new investor who is trying to take an advantage, then probably you say, oh, this is this opportunity. This is God giving me an opportunity to become a rich man. But if you are looking at all those people who held lots of portfolio, then they're losing a lot. So it depends on where you are. You can say God is smiling or God is not happy. But obviously from what is going on, if you're looking at the economy in general, people are losing jobs, business is not going well. I can say that God is not happy with what is happening, though some people are benefiting.
That's really helpful. I guess there will be people watching now who might have some questions for you, even if it's about their own pension, if you're like me and not that many years off it. So let's go on. Let's Fiona, what sort of God is this that lets this sort of thing happen? I mean, I'm feeling like I want to blame God. Should we? What, in your opinion, should we be blaming God for the situation we find ourselves in?
No, I would say no. I think sometimes it seems that just about the only folks who don't hold God accountable for human suffering are atheists. So at least they have one thing right, I would say. Some folks explain suffering by assuming that we deserve what we get, or punishment for our sins, or that the God has his reasons even though we don't understand them. And it's a common moral belief, I think, that the end does not justify the means. Getting a job does not justify the other job, killing other job applicants. And in the Bible, I think God spends a lot of time defining what's moral and holy behaviour. In 2 Timothy, it says if anyone competes as an athlete, he does not receive the victor's crown unless he competes according to the rules. So does the God who teaches us that the end does not justify the means then deal with us as if it did? And I don't think it does. If God is somehow responsible for mankind's misery, if he could stop it but doesn't, if he has reasons but somehow this is all part of some unseen plan that will work to his glory, then he does not practice what he preaches. Some say that suffering can cure us of our faults or make us change and make us better people. Sometimes religious people would like to believe that God has good reasons for making us suffer, yet, you know, those that explain suffering as God's way of teaching us to change are at a loss to specify just what it is about us that we're supposed to change. If a child's hit by a car and dies, it can't be to teach a child a lesson about being careful. The time for the lesson's over. If the child is dead, is it to teach your parents to be more careful at the price of a child's life? I sometimes get offended by those who suggest that God creates illness so that those around him will learn compassion and gratitude. Why should God twist someone else's life to such a degree in order to enhance my spiritual understanding? The value of one human life is a lesson well taught in Scripture, especially in the many parables of Jesus. What was the lesson of the one lost sheep, the value of the one lost coin? Was it not that the importance of one individual to God?
So 42,000 lives, 42,000 individuals in the UK.
Yeah.
That must be quite important.
Yeah, I think it is. And I read an article which said, you know, I don't believe for a moment that God is to blame for anything. He's a myth. And the man Jesus has been dead for 2,000 years. The only thing standing between us and the virus are scientists, medical doctors, and rational people who understand what is required of them to deal with the coronavirus. And the thing is that a secular person needs to provide a satisfactory answer to the question of pain, suffering, and death in the light of this pandemic, just the same as everybody else. And to many, the pain and suffering are often unjust and disproportionate. The problem is that not bad things happen, but that they happen to good people just as much as to bad people, as they say. So to me, you know, for me, I feel in all of this that Jesus is both human and God. And I believe that in Jesus we see two natures united in one person. And that means to me that God cared so deeply for his creation, that he entered his creation, he became part of his creation by taking up a human nature in the person of Jesus. And what did Jesus do? Well, he suffered tremendously for his own horrendous death on the cross. And that to me is given hope, I think, to hold on in a hopeless situation and courage to stand upon when we need it. And I certainly don't know all the answers to these deep and difficult questions, but as followers of Jesus, I think we can know that we will inevitably encounter pain and suffering, whether it's in the form of coronavirus or any other form. And it's not a matter of if, but a matter of when. But God never promised that we'll never go through pain and suffering. I think he expects us not to be surprised when we encounter it. But I think that God...
Stop you there, Fiona, thank you ever so much. I found that, well, I like to hear your passion. It's good to hear your passion. And I don't want to stop folks, though, from shouting at this God, even though you don't want to blame him. I think God does provide an option for shouting at, just as you provide an option for your electorate to shout at you. There is an option to shout at God, and that's a very biblical principle as well. But thank you, liked your passion, liked you telling the story. Thank you. Laurent, Uncle Laurent, our resident theologian. I'm recalling a verse in the Bible that says, "For God so loved the world that he allowed a pandemic." A world that God created and continues to create. I'm afraid God's got to take some responsibility, hasn't he, for this? I think I'm blaming him.
Well, be careful, you may be sacked at the end of it. I was very interested by the term blame, the word blame, the verb blame. Because when we have the verb blame, we assume that something was wrong, something went wrong, something went unfair. And I think that God to be blamed, so that would mean that God is unfair. Or maybe, as you said yourself, he didn't stop it. And as Methodists, we do believe that God is around us, is always with us, including within the COVID-19. He's working with us, he's with the people in hospital, and that is what gives us strength. I was fascinated to see the discussions on the Facebook when we advertised for tonight. And there were a small group of people who were, I think they were thinking to be very, very clever and starting to tell us that God should be put to court for crime against humanity. It was fascinating to see the conversation around it and how they felt very clever about it. And I felt I had to remind them that that question or that point had been made 1,000 years ago. Even within the Bible, you can just look at Job, the book of Job, where disaster, even illness, and trying to find a reason for it. But that is human, isn't it? We all want to blame someone. And when it's a little bit uncomfortable to blame or to think about it as our own responsibility, it's very easy to blame someone else a little bit distant, who feel a little bit distant. And I think that's a very good point of Fiona, that very often it's people who are atheist or don't believe in God who blame God, which is quite fascinating to observe on social media. Nevertheless, I think that we have our own responsibility. God gives us free will, that's a gift. And for some people, we'll say it's also a curse. And I do believe that when you're looking at the past pandemic, we are talking about the swine flu, or we're talking about the different, even Ebola, is always linked to greed and poverty. Always develop in a place of poverty. And they always associated with greed, and especially the way we produce food, and especially the way we use farming, intensive farming. And as you know, Andrew, that is part of my background before to become a minister. So I'm really passionate about it, how intensive farming have been make food a lot of cheaper, which is good for people who can't afford it, but also increase the risk of passing virus from one species to another. So we are blaming God. We may want to think about our own way to live in society. The church, the Bible is not here to explain natural phenomena, but we're here to reflect about them. And the Bible is helping us. And the Bible is all about fairness and about love. And it's what God is telling us. And it's what God is trying to tell us in our ear. Just listen to God. And I think if we are a little bit less greedy, and if we start to share, and we start to respect the environment, this kind of pandemic may be limited, and we maybe do things. So blaming God, I will be keener to say blaming maybe the way humanity is managing the creation. So we may want to blame God because that is easy, but I think very often it's try to avoid our own responsibilities.
Wow, thank you. Laurent always brings a kind of freshness, doesn't he, to the biblical view. Thank you for that. And I think I might want to come back to you a little bit later when we've heard from the others. Don't forget to pop your question. If you've got a question specifically for Laurent, put that in the Q&A. You can actually direct your question to Laurent. Feel free to do that. Sarah, we're coming to you now. In your experience, is there anything that we can learn about our responsibilities? It almost follows on from what Laurent said, actually. Is there anything we can learn about human responsibility as a result of COVID-19?
I think thinking about that question, the word I've got written down on my piece of paper is care. I think the pandemic has taught us many things. It has produced an outpouring of compassion and care in people for many other people in society, and I think we need to harness that and continue with that. I've got several things written down. I think our responsibilities as humans, and I think it echoes what Laurent has said, I think that we do need to take responsibility for the fact that we've been given free will and that we don't always get it right. And there are lots of inequalities in our world. And I think that COVID has highlighted many of those. There is no doubt that death rates have been higher where there have been health inequalities and poverty and overcrowding and poor housing and homelessness. It has heightened problems with mental health and domestic abuse and all those things that we know go on and that we do care about, but maybe we don't act on. And I think for me, we've got a responsibility as human beings and as Christians, believers in a God who loved us so much that he sent us his son. We have to care for other people and try to get rid of those inequalities, the inequalities in food supplies and the inequalities in healthcare. And try and take that forward as a response to the pandemic, which I think perhaps has brought it closer to home for us. It's very easy to watch an Ebola outbreak on the telly and think that's in Africa, that's a long way away. It's very easy to watch things about people getting malaria and dying in our lovely cold climate where the mosquito doesn't stand a chance. But when it's on your doorstep, it becomes real, and maybe it's made us look at those responsibilities and say, yeah, we do have those responsibilities. We have those responsibilities to care, and God will help us to do that, I think.
Sarah, thank you. I think probably those of us who've just watched you there have seen why you do the job you do. The real care and compassion in what you're saying, that you would actually like to see the human race become better and to do better at the caring. Thank you for sharing in that. Jen, saved you to the last. Jen, we've kept hearing from many people, we're following the science. We're following the science. That's why we're deciding to do this. We're following the science. Have science and technology been more use than any God in facing up to the threat of this COVID-19 virus?
Some people make science sound like a fairy dancing down the path of the light. It's quite funny sometimes. Maybe start with what is science? I have a background in physics, and to me, science is looking at the world and trying to understand what's going on, taking a series of observations and trying to have a regular way to understand that and to make predictions. Maybe, if I do X and Y, then Z will happen. What it's not is turning a crank and getting an answer out. There are humans involved in that process. You have to say, if you're going to do an experiment, what experiment do I do? Why do I find that one interesting, not this one? So
Jen, we just seem to have lost you there for a moment. We'll try and get you back. I wonder if Joe might wave at me if we get Jennifer back again. Oh, you are back, Jen. Sorry, we lost you for a moment. Can you come back in?
Sorry, I think the internet is crowded around here. So science is not about turning a crank and getting answers out. It's about the questions that you ask and being interested in understanding what's going on. And I do believe that science is a gift from God. We're told in Corinthians that knowledge and wisdom are gifts of the Spirit, and the process of being able to understand it is a gift. And I would also say that science is an obligation of a society that's trying to follow God. We're probably familiar with the concept that caring for creation and loving your neighbour is something that Christians do. Christians generally think that's a good idea. And if you take those tasks seriously, you want to get better at doing them. You don't just go, oh, I'll just do that really quickly and say, oh yeah, that's done, tick that off the list. You take the time. If you've got a new job and you want to do well in it, you'll take the training courses. You'll look for feedback. You'll listen to other people. You'll try and understand better so that you can do better. And I think if a society cares about looking after creation and looking after other people, they will invest the time in science and medical science so that they can do those tasks better. And maybe one other point I'd like to make is that science is fundamentally just going to be a tool, and what you do with it will depend on what you think is important. You can ask two different questions of science. For example, how do I kill as many people as possible? And then you might do things like develop nuclear weapons, which has happened. Or you might say, how can I heal as many people as possible? And you might find that yourself developing treatments for cancer or for COVID-19 or something like that. There's lots of possibilities, but it all fundamentally starts with the question. And the question you ask is going to be heavily influenced by what you think of the world, what your faith is. So maybe a question to think about is, what question does God want you to ask today?
Wow. Yeah, somebody did say about the amount of money that has been spent on weapons of destruction compared to weapons of salvation and healing. And maybe we've got that a little bit skewed. Debbie, it's good to get your question. Thank you for asking that about whether there's been a nudge on our consciences, that God is involved in nudging consciences at the moment. I think we've heard some of that from our panelists already, that yes, consciences are being nudged about what really should matter and what is really important. Laurent, would you like to add something?
Yes, I think the point of nudging the conscience is an important one, and within the Christian understanding, and especially understanding of time, we have two words to describe time. We have the chronos and we have the kairos. And the kairos is an important notion of time when something is happening. Chronos is following from past to present to future. Kairos is a time which is fixed and something is changing dramatically. It's a time where humanity and the deity with the divine are meeting for a change, an important change for all of us. So I think that the question of a time where our mind have been nudged, I think is very, very important. And again, it's not only about the perception of God, but it's also about the way we live our life. As we said early on that time, now people are discovering that spending more time with their family is very, very important. And working or traveling can change dramatically, or doing shopping change completely dramatically. If you think about 6 months ago, what people thought the most important, it was about shopping. Now it's not anymore. It's about passing time with family. So this time of COVID-19 have changed dramatically the perception of people. And I think that is important when we are talking about the kairos. I think the COVID-19, because it touched us directly, it's not like Ebola on the west coast of Africa or malaria somewhere else, is among us. And therefore, it made us to think in a very different way. And this kairos, this time of change, this time of perception of the eternal, is going to change dramatically our society. Of course, some bits are going to come back the way we want it, and especially when we are talking about greed and fun and all these kind of things. But I think that within the society, these 2-3 months have changed dramatically what is happening, changed dramatically the way people perceive themselves and the relation with others. The Bible, the whole Bible is about relationship. And I think COVID-19 has definitely helped us to perceive the importance of relationship, a special moment.
I get the kairos, so you're pointing us to a kairos moment, and you're full of hope.
Yeah.
You're speaking with a very hopeful voice there, Laurent. Do you all share that hope, the rest of the panelists? Anybody like to come in on that? Do you share Laurent's hope? Sarah, you look as if you might manage to say something on this.
Yeah, I might. And I was just looking at the other question that had popped up on the chat. And yeah, I think we do need to be hopeful and mindful. And the other question that had popped up on the chat was that, is it fair when our people on this island at this time are the ones who are suffering, to point out to our own communities that things like COVID, mass illness, disasters are common in other parts of the world all the time, or should we stay quiet? I would answer that by saying, no, I don't think we should stay quiet. I think we should speak out, because unless we speak out, then we haven't got that hope that things are going to get better. And I suppose you could bring that into what was happening last week about race relations, particularly in America, and say possibly COVID has kind of given that a push. And is that a bad thing? So I think, no, we shouldn't stay quiet. We should point this out to people. We should say there's disease and there's disaster in other parts of the world. And maybe this has opened our eyes to how life is for many other people all of the time, not just some of the time.
Thank you. We seem to be coming back again and again to this. Now is the time. Something is happening right now, and are human beings going to respond to that? Are human beings actually going to seize this moment and do something about malaria and diarrhea, and do something about the way that we trade unfairly, in a way that some lives matter more than others? I can see that this is the moment, and will we seize it? I want to be a little bit provocative in asking, in saying, in some ways, I do blame God, because God gave us this outrageous gift of choice. Had He made us and programmed us to do the right thing all the time, we wouldn't have got ourselves in this mess. But by giving us the choice as to what we do with the science, what we do with the finance, Isaac, what we do with our health service, and how we behave as politicians, and how the church does its business, by giving us that gift, suddenly the whole thing is, the possibility for things like destruction begin. But yeah, anybody like to come back? Not you, Laurent. You've talked too much already. So, Fiona, do you want to come in? I know I cut you off earlier. Do you want to come in on that? No, sorry. Okay. Okay, good. Joe had a question. Joe's question was, do you think we'll end up going back to how it was, or will there be a new something else following this Kairos moment? Yeah, Fiona, yes.
Yeah, unfortunately, I think unless we have a call to action, then we will go back to the way we were. I think we've had a lot of time maybe and a lot of well, relative peacefulness to sit and to think and to consider things. But I think when we get back out, shops are open and things like that. I think now is the time if we want to a call to action to make sure that things don't go back to where they were. You know, even from a practical level, I've seen like at council where we need to work together with other organisations. It needs to be joined up thinking. You know, key workers need places for their children just now. The Scottish Government have said yes, you have to have them, but we don't have them. So there needs to be a joined up approach, and I think, and that's great at the moment. But then if things all start going back to normal, that easily gets forgotten. And I think communities have been really active and really good at working together. We need to build on that and not go back to the way we were.
Thank you, Fiona. That's really helpful. Anybody else like to add to that? Are we going back to the old ways, or is there a new normal? Anybody want to have a go? Isaac, yeah, Isaac. Isaac, are you able to unmute yourself?
I've unmuted myself. We may go back to the old ways, but it's probably going to take a long time, because I don't see myself going back into the office again, Monday to Friday again, for a long time until all this is settled. So it depends on what is going to happen. But it's an unknown thing, whether the situation is going to get better or not. But as it stands, we are far away from the norm. So it's going to be a new norm. And I mean, we're thinking about new ways of working. I mean, assuming we went back into the office, we cannot sit next to each other, desk to desk again. So obviously, there are going to be provisions will have to be made. Not everybody can be in the office at the same time. So, like I say, working Monday to Friday, 9 to 5, all the time, is far away.
Thank you. Thanks ever so much. Yeah, there are some very practical differences that the new normal is going to give us. Sue has commented, rather than asking a question, more saying that everyone is going to be taking responsibility in a way that perhaps we haven't in the past. We've blamed others and made it other people's responsibility, but that by doing things like social distancing, or physical distancing as I'd rather call it, we've taken responsibility, or some of that, for ourselves, and that's also been something quite positive. Somebody's asked the question, are we sure we've got this right way round? Should we be asking God the questions, or is God actually asking us the questions now? Perhaps God is asking us the questions, and I wonder what questions God is asking us. I think each one of the panelists has said something on that. Would you want to answer, go any further on that? Any question that you think God might be asking us at this time? Jen, you've said about you've said about the science that there is a question. What are you going to do with this science then? What are you going to do with the investment that we've put into science? Sarah, carry on. Yeah, sorry, Sarah.
I think the question, well, one of the questions for me is, where do our priorities lie? At our own level, so a personal level, and a societal level. Where are our priorities? And we've seen today on the news the debate raging about free school meals. Should we be feeding our children? Well, yes, we should, because it's good for them. And if our children are fed properly, they are more able to access learning. And you know, so I think one of the questions for me is about what should our priorities be as a society, and that's as a wider society, and maybe as a church body, what can we do to influence how our society goes forward.
Yeah, and somebody here is pointing out there, Sarah, following on from what you're saying, that the recession that is going to follow on from this in the economy, the consequences of recession in the past have often led to very strange and sometimes violent behaviours. Are we going to be able to deal with the consequences of the economy going into massive recession? Jennifer, is that you wanting to talk, or are you just nodding? No.
Sorry, I have to get closer to my tablet to see what the questions are.
Just asking really about the fear that negative behaviour will be a consequence of what's happening now. Laurent, will you pick that up? Jennifer's frozen again. So.
Yeah, there's two things who come to mind here. Is yes, we are going to have an economic recession. It will be very difficult to not have one. Now, the question is going to be how long that recession is going to happen. But when you're looking at history, we know as well that usually when there's a crisis, could be an economic crisis or any other form of crisis, the crisis is painful, but we need to look at 10 years after. So of course, when we got the last economic crisis, it was very painful. We had unemployment and so on and so forth. But 10 years later is when we got the social unrest. And we're coming back to this notion of greed. And when Isaac was telling us earlier on that there's some people who have made a lot of money and other people who have lost a lot of money, that is increasing the gap between people. And that I'm very, very, very concerned that the COVID-19 is not only now, but in 10 years' time, what is going to be the state of the society. And that brings me back to the thing about greed. And a few weeks ago, we were walking on the ground of the Palace of Hamilton, of the Duke of Hamilton. And I thought that was there's a wonderful story behind it, the Duke of Hamilton paradox. This man who made a lot of money on the misery of other people, and especially in a coal mine on his own land, where he sent children and all these kind of things, people suffering dramatically for him to be richer and richer. But his greed didn't see that he was doing tunnel under his own palace, and his palace collapsed because he was too greedy. He was trying to exploit as much as he could the coal under his palace. And I think that we have a risk here, again, the greed. And in 10 years' time, things are going to be very, very different. And it's in 10 years' time that the pain could be even worse and very, very different from what we have now. And as a church, we have a responsibility, not looking now, what could be in 10 years' time.
Thank you. Somebody has mentioned thank you, Laurent. Somebody has mentioned the question of climate change also being probably the major crisis which is facing us at this time. Has COVID-19 helped us to face up to that in any way? Will we respond to that? Jennifer, do you want to try and come in on that?
I can try if my internet cooperates. I think one thing it might have done positively is show us that it is possible to do actually rather a lot without necessarily traveling all the time. We do have to be aware that the internet and technology is not without its own impact on the climate and so on. To make this run, there is a computer sitting away in a data center burning quite a lot of energy to make this all happen for us. But it's probably still much lower impact than it would have been if we'd all tried to travel to the same place. So that's something we can maybe build on the lessons that we've learned here as we try and take forward, moving forward on climate change in a positive way.
Thank you. Thank you. The person who asked the question, I think, wanted us to also say that as a church, we perhaps need to speak out more on that. So I think we've covered quite a lot tonight in talking about the impact on the climate, on We've thought quite a bit about disease all over the world, about the malaria, diarrhea, crisis, disasters. We've talked about making little differences, each one of us making a small difference that can make a big difference altogether. We've talked about impact on finance, on politics, on science, on our understanding of God, on understanding of who is healthy and who isn't healthy. Covered quite a lot within nearly an hour. I'm very committed to us finishing at 8 o'clock, and I wanted to take this opportunity to thank the 5 panelists who have prepared for today and been willing to be up before this audience. So thank you to Sarah and Isaac, to Fiona and Jennifer and Laurent. Thank you to Joe, who has been the technical support behind all this, the mastermind behind the project. Thanks to Joe. Thanks to all of you who've joined us from all over the place. I think it's been good. I think it's been an interesting start. We've never done anything like this before, but I think there might be another one. So, well, yeah, we're going to push the boat out, and Laura and I are going to say we're going to have another one in a fortnight. That's 2 weeks tonight at 8 o'clock. I'm going to look at the issue of what's the point of remembering. Yes, it's coming out of some of the stuff with statues being torn down. What is it about memory, our street names, our own names, our history, our stories? What's the point? So we'd really like you to come and bring a friend and tell a few friends about what we're doing in a fortnight. That's the 30th of June. We think that talking really matters. We think that talking is really important. And we decided to put this webinar on the 16th of June as a memorial to Joe Cox. It's the anniversary of Joe Cox's death today, and we wanted to remember her life, which was a life of listening to others and giving others a voice. So we wanted to give you a voice, those of you who have come along and spent the hour with us. We wanted to give the panelists who come from different parts of society a chance to speak, and each one of them carries in their heart a faith in this God who has given us the choice to seize this Kairos moment and to make a difference. Thank you again to all of you, and God bless you this night and in the days to come. Bye-bye.